Hi everyone. Today's episode of Overdue Finds is about books from Indigenous authors. It's important to note while you listen to this episode that we had recorded it only a few days before the tragic news of the mass grave at the Kamloops Indian Residential School, which contained the remains of 215 Indigenous children. We felt it was important for us to address this tragedy since it's not mentioned during the episode that you're about to hear. But EPL does have items and other resources that you might want to check out.
Copies of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report and calls to action are available through the library. EPL also has resources for all ages about residential schools and child removal policies. To learn more, please visit epl.ca/indigenous or check out the link to the list of items in today's episode notes. If you are a survivor and need support, a national crisis line is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week through the Residential School Survivor Support Line at 1-866-925-4419.
Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Caroline, how are you today? What's going on over there at the Capilano branch today?
I was telling you just before we started recording that there was a dog walking by the library, and it was quite exciting because we do see a number of dogs throughout the day, and it's always nice to kind of see them out enjoying their day.
Exactly. I mean, I've been working at home since like November, and I'm in a condo, so I don't see too many dogs walking by my place very often unless I'm like purposely looking out the window. So I'm totally jealous just, with all of your giant windows there, just being able to see more people than I am, and especially those dogs around the Capilano neighborhood.
It's pretty great. And Bryce, I wanted to follow up on something we talked about, I think, last fall. How is your fantasy hockey going?
Oh, wow. Thank you for bringing that up. So the season ended a little rough for my team. So it's interesting, though, because like when we're recording this, it was only a couple days ago that the Oilers, unfortunately, were eliminated from the playoffs. How fantasy hockey works, though, is that it's only really tied to the regular season.
Oh.
So luckily, the playoffs, like the actual NHL playoffs, really don't affect it. But my team, unfortunately, got bounced in the first round, but that's okay. We're gonna come back stronger than ever next year. We got some young players in place, so
some rebuilding.
We are definitely retooling my lineup, and when we get into the fall, maybe we'll have to do an episode on fantasy sports, and I can give everybody some tips.
I would like that. It sounds like fun.
Yeah. Today, though, we're talking about something completely different. We're in June now, which is awesome. Summer's here. And, of course, June, if you're not familiar with it, is actually National Indigenous History Month. So today on Overdue Finds, we're actually going to be talking about some titles like books and even maybe some movies or documentaries from Indigenous authors and writers that you can borrow from us here at EPL. So, it's a topic that we unfortunately don't cover a lot, but I'm glad we're able to talk about it today. Right, Caroline?
Yeah, I have talked about some titles in my Overdue Finds picks. I'm going to reference those again later, but I just thought this would be a good opportunity to highlight some books and authors and stories that people might not have heard about.
Yeah. Caroline, it seems like last few episodes we've had some first-time guests on, which we both always love.
Great.
So we want to welcome to the show for the first time Caitlin Miller, and Caitlin is with our Indigenous Services Team here at EPL. Caitlin, welcome to Overdue Finds. How are you today?
Hi, Bryce and Caroline. I'm doing pretty good today. The weather's nice outside, and we just finished up a little stint with our Sing Sign Laugh and Learn here at the Woodcroft Library, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. A little bit sad maybe that my 6-week is over, but yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Thanks.
I was going to say, you are coming to us from the Woodcroft Library, and I know that you've worked at a number of branches across the system as well.
Yes. Just about all of them at this point.
Some people may have recently seen Caitlin on we have that new weekly 3 series, and Caitlin was just on this past Monday chatting all about Indigenous graphic novels. So yeah, great job on that, Caitlin. So was it, if you haven't watched it, we'll have a link to it in our show notes, of course, but did those titles that you recommended just quickly come to you right away?
Yeah, I just talked about 2 because I wanted to also plug the Gale courses. They have this really great course taught by Chad Walker. He's like a comic book artist / video game artist, and he teaches you how to draw. So I did want to plug that, but I also had 2 comics that I talked about. One was Moonshot, the Indigenous comic collection. And I just showed a little bit of the art from that. It's a collaboration of all kinds of different artists and writers, and it's just beautiful. It's a great book. And then also This Place, 150 Years Retold, which is another collab work, and that one is sort of a little retelling of history from an Indigenous perspective. And again, it's a great book. Everyone should read that book. In my opinion. Maybe you're not quite into comics, but you should definitely maybe try this one out because it's really not just educational, but interesting and beautiful, beautiful art and all that stuff.
We've talked quite a bit about graphic novels on the podcast before, so you're in a safe place here chatting all about that stuff. So I'm sure you've got maybe some other recommendations later on, but
yes.
as I mentioned, you are part of the Indigenous Services Team here at EPL. Can you share with our listeners a little bit more about what the team does?
The Indigenous Services Team is sort of responsible for some of the system-wide programs, classes that we have at EPL. So, for example, you'll see we have like the Cree language courses. We would have played a part in organizing that. Any kind of artist spotlight. We just recently had one with Tyler, who's an artist, an Indigenous artist that is drawing for Marvel and I think DC even. Yeah, we just organize big events. We've had all kinds of stuff over the years. 2020 wasn't the greatest year for having big stuff go on. Just before we sort of started the first lockdown, we were doing sort of collaborative work with the Alberta Museum Association. Prior to that, we had the winners from the last Amazing Race Canada come and see us. We had screenings of various documentary films. So all kinds of stuff. We're kind of behind that sort of thing. And we work also with Emily Riddle, who's our Indigenous Services Advisor. So she works on the team as well. And so she's been doing a lot of amazing stuff lately. But yeah, that's kind of what we do. All kinds of stuff. It's a little fly by the seat of our pants sometimes, but yeah.
I was at the event with Anthony and James from Amazing Race Canada, and that was just so fantastic. Not only are they so engaging and we could have been listening to them all evening when they were telling their stories, but as a fan of reality TV as well, like getting that behind the scenes glimpse, and even sometimes, it was interesting to hear what they could and could not talk about under the terms of their contract with the show and disclosures and stuff. So even sometimes when you didn't get an answer from them, the fact that they couldn't answer was interesting in itself.
Yeah. They're great.
Oh yeah, there's some great stories there that I'm sure they're probably just waiting for some contracts to expire or something and then they can share them again.
Speaking of great stories, let's go to our Overdue Finds picks.
I do want to quickly mention something, though.
Yeah.
after not our pop culture crafting episode, but the one before that. So that was our best and worst parents in pop culture episode. We actually got a really nice email from listener Kelly, and she had some great feedback on that episode. She shared with us a couple of thoughts on Gilmore Girls, but she mentioned that we missed a couple of obvious parents on our list. So Kelly mentioned, having just finished your best worst parents episode, I'll throw a couple of my picks out there too. They might seem obvious, but I'm going to go with best mom is Molly Weasley, and worst dad award has to go to Darth Vader. Actually, I'm surprised no one mentioned him. Repeatedly attempting to murder your children must count for something, right? Yeah, that was one of those ones afterwards where, I don't know how we missed out on Darth Vader.
Yeah, totally. That like dismembering your child, the attempted murder. And then, you could say that it's because the story wasn't fully fleshed out, or you could just chalk it up to Darth Vader not being the greatest parent. But I mean, I think there's a scene in Empire Strikes Back where they're in like the Cloud City, and the doors open, and Darth Vader's at the end of that table, and Leia's there, and he has no interest in her at all. And I think it's because at that time it wasn't really worked out that she was his daughter. But in hindsight, you can just be like, this is not. I mean, maybe it's better that he wasn't paying attention to her.
Yeah, I mean, George Lucas has come out and said that was like he had this thing mapped out all along. But I don't know. I call shenanigans on that, because there's just certain stuff that happens in that series that, like, if you had the whole thing like worked out, it wouldn't have happened that way. So yeah, it's a little off.
Yeah. Another parent, former guest, friend of the show, Holly Arneson, mentioned was the dad from Dirty Dancing was worthy of discussion as kind of a good but complicated father. So I think there's definitely room here for a part 2 episode.
Yeah, I think so. And I didn't even get to go into my whole tirade about Grandpa Joe from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which I will save for another day. I've talked about him a few times on the show, so longtime listeners know my thoughts on Grandpa Joe. But yeah, there's so many more parents we could have chatted about. So yeah, Caroline, clearly we need to do a part 2 on this one. But we just also want to quickly thank Kelly for writing in. And she mentioned too that she was really looking forward to our pop culture crafting episode, which was our last one, since she works at Michael's. So I was a little nervous after I read that, because she might be going through our picks and just questioning everything that we talked about, with her being an expert and everything. But if you'd like to send us your thoughts on any of our episodes, you can reach us at podcast@epl.ca, and both Caroline and myself get those emails. So we always love hearing from listeners. So Caroline, now let's move into our recent Overdue Finds picks.
Great idea, Bryce.
Caitlin, first time on the show. What's a title that you can recommend to listeners that you've enjoyed lately?
Lately, I'm a bit of a closet sci-fi, and they've been doing all these like revamps of old sci-fi classics, making them into movies. I know Dune is one of them, and I had reread Dune, and a friend of mine actually challenged me to reread the other, 5 sequels? And I was like, oh, maybe later. But I've been rereading the Isaac Asimov Foundation series. There's 3 in that series: Foundation, Empire, and Second Foundation. Because there's a movie coming out soon, or a TV show. So I've been really excited to reread that, because I loved that series so much. It may have played a small role in my desire to work at a library. So I'm really enjoying rereading that, and I'm really excited for I think it's a TV show, actually. I'd have to look it up. And so I was, kind of thinking, there's all these like sci-fi remakes. What if they remade like Gibson's Neuromancer? And I Googled it, and they're actually remaking that one too. So Deadpool's Tim Miller is supposedly going to be directing this movie. So they're really bringing back all the sci-fi classics from days of old.
Wow. Isaac Asimov. I can honestly say I've never read any of his books before, but he's a part, like, it doesn't matter where you go. Like, if it's the library or a bookstore, anywhere that pretty much has a sci-fi section, it seems like there's like hundreds of his books available.
Yeah.
I don't know how many books he's written, but it's just, it has to be in the hundreds, isn't it?
I don't know either, but it's a lot. As with many of that sort of sci-fi fantasy, there always seems to be quite a few. I actually didn't know there was 5 sequels to the Dune series until my friend told me, oh, by the way, here's these other huge books you should read.
It's funny. It's so funny you bring that up, because the other day my brother on Facebook had posted this meme about, because obviously the Dune movie's coming out hopefully later this year, and he's a big Dune fan, and somebody had, like, basically it's a picture of this bookshelf, and there's like 10 or 15 Dune novels, but him being the Dune nerd that he is like, actually there's only 6, and this is the correct order that you should be reading these Dune novels in. So do you have thoughts on that as well? Is there a correct order, or you just go book 1, 2, 3, 4?
I've been told you just go through book 1, 2, 3, 4, but I don't know how reliable my source is. My friend who suggested, she may have just suggested that I read these books to torture me. I'm not really sure.
We might need
it's a lot of reading.
Yeah, yes. We might need to look into this.
As I said, I love sci-fi. I am definitely not. I would say I'm pretty newbie when it comes to that sort of thing, but I do love the sci-fi classics big time. So I'm enjoying rereading the Foundation trilogy.
Nice. Yeah, friend of the podcast, and member of the Overdue Finds family, Meg DeForest, is another big sci-fi fan. So whenever she's on the show, I know she always has a sci-fi pick for us. So maybe we'll have to have you both on and do a sci-fi novel episode here.
She can school me on that stuff.
That's right. Caroline, how about you? What have you been enjoying lately?
I have a movie this week that I wanted to talk about, and it is called The Bedroom Window. And this is a crime thriller from the 1980s starring Steve Guttenberg as the dramatic, charismatic leading man in this thriller.
The Guttenberg. So what about this movie is something that everybody should check out, besides, like, you sold me already on Steve Guttenberg,
right? But, like, that's all I needed to drop in. I think people should check it out, because I saw it and there's just so much that I want to talk about, and I just want to talk about this movie with someone. So Steve Guttenberg, here's the plot. Steve Guttenberg's having an affair with his boss's wife. She is played by Isabelle Huppert, who's a brilliant French actress. They're hooking up in his apartment when she sees outside a man attacking a young woman. She goes to the window, scares him off. They think it's over. The next day, they learn that a different woman was murdered not too far from his apartment. And they think that the guy she saw is probably the killer. But she can't go to the police, because then she would have to reveal why she was in Steve Guttenberg's apartment. So they come up with this plan where he is going to tell the police he saw the guy and pretend that he's the witness so that they can get the description and go. And so at this point in the movie, for about like 5 seconds, you're like, okay, I guess, yeah. And then immediately you're just like, this is the worst idea ever. This is never going to work, and it's going to end terribly. And it does, because as it goes on, the police start to suspect that Steve Guttenberg is maybe not telling the truth. And of course, he isn't. But is it because of the reasons the police think? Is he involved in this somehow? How is this all playing out? It's kind of twisty. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but the cast is full of people where you just go, hey, I know that guy from something else. And then you spend a lot of time trying to figure it out. Wallace Shawn has, like, it's about like one step above Cameo as a defense attorney who is like parachuted in from another movie. He just brings this bolt of energy into it, this amazing performance. It's so incongruous with the rest of the film. The sexual like storylines of everything, the way that violence, that women are treated. More people should see this movie so that I have someone to talk about it with.
I'll be honest with you. Like, I like to think I know my 80s movies. Like, I would take, like, you know, I'd be put up against a lot of people, but I'd never heard of that movie until today.
I hadn't heard of it until I was scrolling through Canopy one day, and so we have it's streaming through Canopy. 1987, directed by Curtis Hanson. So the cast, the team behind it, was based on a novel. Interesting kind of how it came together. There are just elements of it that are of the time, of the genre, when it all gets put together. I don't know that it's ultimately successful, but there's so much happening in this movie.
Wow. Well, clearly I need to watch this now, so maybe yes. I can talk about it with you on our next episode.
Yeah, when we do our, I don't know if it's our crime thrillers or Steve Guttenberg episode, but we will be revisiting it, I'm sure.
We could definitely make a case for just a Steve Guttenberg episode, and we might break all of our download records with that one.
Would be tapping into something that's clearly in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, Bryce, I am so curious to ask if you have a baseball pick this week.
You know what? I don't. I thought about it, and honestly, I could have gone 3 straight episodes.
Then you're out. It would have been really good.
Yeah. I would have been booted as the co-host of this show for just bringing up baseball all the time. But no, I went with something a little bit different. Today I actually have a music pick. It's something that I don't recommend very often. I've joked around about my taste in music before. So my pick this week is actually an album. It's brand new, and that is Van Weezer by the band Weezer, and we have it in our collection on both CD and on Hoopla. So yeah, so obviously I've talked a few times on the show about I'm a fan of classic rock, and it's not that I don't like new music, but sometimes it's comforting to go back and listen to music that you love. And Weezer's one of those bands that I've been a fan of since high school. I think when they first came out with the song Buddy Holly, and that music video to this day is still one of my all-time favorites. All the songs on their new album feature music that obviously is heavily inspired by classic rock. Even the album cover itself looks like something that you would see on a cassette back in the the 80s or early 90s. So yeah, it definitely has that kind of Van Halen type feel to it. Some of my favorite songs on the new album are Hero and I Need Some of That. So this is, as we're getting into some nice weather here and everything, and people are out driving around, maybe hitting the highway and everything for the weekend, Van Weezer is awesome driving music.
I was going to ask.
Go check it out.
I was going to ask how to best maybe enjoy this album.
It's funny because like when I first listened to it, I was just, threw it on while working from home, and I don't know, I felt like I needed to get up and move after listening to it. So yeah, definitely driving is the way to do it. Or if you're outside working out or whatever, this would also be a great one to exercise to.
All right. Well, we'll have to check back in and see if any of the songs make the short list for Song of the Summer.
Yes, definitely. All right, so let's get to why we're here today. Of course, we are talking about some titles by Indigenous authors. And Caitlin, let's start with fiction. What are some fiction titles by Indigenous authors that our listeners might want to check out?
It's a big list. It was really hard to think of like the ones that I should talk about today because there's so much fantastic material out there. I kind of wanted to start with a little story about how I got into reading Indigenous books, Canadian Indigenous authors. And it started a very long time ago in like a first year Canadian literature class. And my professor had assigned a book by Eden Robinson, Monkey Beach, as one of our critical analysis books. And I just fell in love with that book. I was surprised that I had never really read any Indigenous authors prior to that. And I just loved the way Robinson wrote the book. I love the way the landscape was described in the book. If you haven't heard of it before, Eden Robinson, she also wrote, I think it's a trilogy right now, Son of a Trickster, Trickster Drift, Return of the Trickster. They're kind of her newer books. She also wrote Blood Sports, but Monkey Beach is my personal favorite, and it's set in sort of around the Kitimat area of BC, and it is sort of a mythical story. The main character, her brother gets lost at sea, and it sort of is told between like flashbacks of her growing up. So it's a bit of a coming of age story, but also it kind of goes to present time where she's searching for her brother, and she can speak with spirits and sort of sees this sort of world behind the curtain, so to speak. One of the biggest things I loved about the book is it talks a lot about the Bugwis, which is the Sasquatch, and sort of the mythology behind that. And when I was little, my dad and I used to always tell stories about the Sasquatch. He used to work with CN Rail around Yale in BC, so similar area, and he had all kinds of similar stories of strange things that he'd seen. And so I just really connected with that book on a personal level. So I definitely recommend reading Monkey Beach, but really anything Eden Robinson has written is just fantastic fiction. If you like sort of that magical realism and sort of mythical, if you like ghost stories, I mean, she's got it all in her books. She's just a fantastic writer. If you want something that's more funny, I know some of the Indigenous material can be a little heavy, but if you're looking for something that's just a great, funny read, I really recommend Nobody Cries at Bingo. That's by Dawn Dumont, who's a comedian. She's Cree from Okonees First Nation in Saskatchewan, and it is hilarious. It's so funny. I love this book so much. I cracked up so much reading it. Tells really lovely story too. There's some hardship, but also it's uplifting. It's kind of told in little short story snippets of life on Okonees First Nation. So it's a nice one to sort of read when you can just pick up, read a chapter, put it down, and then you'll go on to the next story.
I think Dawn Dumont, she also has the anthology collection, Glass Beads.
Yeah, so we did I can't remember. I have terrible memory. We did sort of was it Canada-wide reading of that book?
It was one of the ones I think that was offered with access through libraries, yeah.
Yeah, so another, of course, great author and really, really funny. I just love this book. There's one part where it talks about how her mom would tell every boy that was remotely interested in her that it was her cousin. No, you can't date him. It's your cousin. Really funny stuff. Yeah, so I definitely recommend Nobody Cries at Bingo, Dawn Dumont. It's a great book. It's wonderful. What else have I read that I really loved? Split Tooth by Tanya Tagok is an amazing book. She's the Inuit throat singer. It's about a young woman growing up in Nunavut. And again, it's sort of right up my alley, myth and animals and the land. It's a beautiful story. And with Indigenous books, what I really love about those stories is they often weave the natural world into myth and reality, and it's all contemporary. And I really love stories like that. And I think that kind of story is really popular. And if you like that kind of stuff, definitely check out Indigenous authors, because that's one of the things that I really enjoy about those stories.
Nice.
What else do I have? I recently read another book called Islands of Decolonial Love. This is by Leanne Berasamosaki Simpson. And she also wrote As We Have Always Done, Indigenous Freedom Through Radical Resistance. So she's a bit of an activist, an Indigenous activist. And this is another sort of set of stories, a little bit heavier, non-linear style, short stories and essays, and they're really personal. Sometimes they're frustrating, but I really felt that they were eye-opening. And at the end of most of the stories, she will have Anishinaabe words and expressions that she's used in the stories, and I really like that. I enjoyed learning about the language and the different sort of sayings that can be found in that. I really connected with this book, and I thought it was really beautiful. And also, again, it gets away from that historical perspective into like actual people, Indigenous people, and their lives and how they live them, not as this sort of stoic person in traditional dress or something like that. This is more like real people and what actually is happening in Canada and elsewhere in North America.
And I think that comes forward when people are able to write their own stories and describe their own realities and share their own experiences, whether fiction or nonfiction, versus people being described by a different race or culture and being used in stories in a different way. One of the books from a couple of years ago that I really liked was Birdie by Tracy Lindbergh.
Yes.
And one of the things that I liked about it that spoke to me was that the story is kind of set around her going on a journey to find her ideal man, who was Jesse from the Beachcombers.
Yes.
And this like blending of like cultural depictions of Indigenous men in that case, as well as the images that people see and have exposed to growing up. But it also blends in Cree teachings, the concept of Wakotowin, the interconnectedness among people and missing and murdered Indigenous women. So it's got the lighter side, but also the elements of it that can't always be taken out of that.
Exactly. Yeah, I think I was reading about Birdie. It's Tracy Lindbergh that is the author, right? Is that? Yeah, and it said, where did I read this on? Goodreads, I think it was, described it as Monkey Beach meets green grass running water meets the Beachcombers. And I thought that was really great. I don't know, maybe some are too young to remember the Beachcombers or not Canadian enough. I'm not sure, but I definitely remember the Beachcombers.
Yeah, I have a sense that our listeners probably.
That and Littlest Hobo were the classics of my youth.
I always joke around about the raccoons and how it was like growing up. It's like I loved watching the raccoons, but at the same time I hated when it ended because I remember it was always on like Sunday nights, and as soon as that was over, it was when I pretty much had to go to bed. So little love-hate relationship there with the raccoons.
That great Canadian TV. I kind of feel that way about Canadian literature in general. It just has this feeling. I can't describe it, but it all has that Canadiana feeling.
I was just going to say quickly, Caroline, regarding the book Birdie, I believe, apologies if I'm wrong here, but I believe that was also a finalist for the Alberta Reader's Choice Awards, like, I want to say 4 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was.
It's hard to say how many years ago stuff happened because I feel like I'm missing a year somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's like, oh, that was like last year. No, that was 3 years ago.
Yeah, pretty much.
I know that we'll dip in and back as we go along, but I really love reading nonfiction. Are there any titles that you've come across and would like to share?
Yes. So I actually just recently finished a really great book by Richard Van Camp. It just came out. It's called Gather, The Joy of Storytelling, and I think we have it in the catalog now. It might still be on order. Definitely keep your eyes open, though. It will be showing up eventually in the EPL catalog. It's a fantastic book. It's so great. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Richard Van Camp and any of his books he's written, or if you've met him. He's like a force. This guy is so great. And this book, you can just hear, he's such a funny guy and he's so articulate. You can just hear his voice throughout this whole book. And he's just talking about what elements make a compelling story and offering insight in how to be a great storyteller. Obviously, he is a fantastic storyteller, and this is centered more around oral stories, telling stories by word, and he talks a lot about stories that have been shared with him over his lifetime, from elders, friends, just people that he knows. It's a fantastic book. I highly recommend reading it. Richard Van Camp is great, and this one is one of my favorites, actually. And he wrote it sort of during COVID and the pandemic. I'm not exactly sure when, but he does talk about that and how stories keep us together and build that sense of community and connect us even when we can't be physically together. So I think it's really important. It's an important message to have, especially right now.
I think we've been very lucky in the past to have Richard as one of our, through our summer starts at EPL, our summer reading campaign for kids. I believe we've been lucky enough to have him in the past as a presenter for some of the programs, haven't we?
Yes, I can't think offhand what he's done, but he's been involved with EPL on a number of projects over the years.
His book, Little You, was the one given out in the Welcome Baby packages.
Yes. Oh. Yep. Yeah, so he's definitely a friend of EPL. We love you, Richard Van Camp. So yeah, I really recommend reading that. And that's also a lot of the times when people are getting into reading Indigenous books, fiction, the stories can be a little bit hard to get into, especially if you're used to sort of the Western concept of like the moral centerpiece of a story. Indigenous stories aren't always told in this really clean, linear fashion. Sometimes they're roundabout, told in a way that brings out that oral history. So I think this book is really important, maybe as a precursor for if you really want to get into reading Indigenous authors. You could pick up Richard Van Camp's book, and he'll talk about storytelling and where that sort of comes from, that style of storytelling.
Caroline, did you have any nonfiction picks that you wanted to share?
Quick mention of past guest and speaker at EPL, Tanya Talaga, who wrote Seven Fallen Feathers about the deaths of several high school students in Ontario and what that meant about and for their community, as well as All Our Relations, which was her Massey lecture series, which looked at mental health and suicide and Indigenous communities more broadly around the world. If you haven't heard it, go back and listen to our interview with Tanya Talaga. It was great, and I remember when she did her talk at EPL, which was live streamed because it happened during COVID, but she said something similar about the way that she was telling and phrasing it, and kind of kept coming back in almost a circular way, or would introduce one kind of piece of it to explain another piece, and it was just a really great experience listening to her talk. I've also really enjoyed the book Indigenous Rights by Chelsea Vowel, and that is rights with a W-R-I, but it is a really accessible breaking down of some of the historical political context for particularly First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all Indigenous peoples in what is now Canada, and how it has come to be what it is in different jurisdictions or different parts of the country and parts of the law, breaking down myth, explaining kind of common misunderstanding or common misconception of Indigenous people, and really explaining things in a way that allows people who maybe didn't learn about these historical pieces in school or in their lives. It allows them to enter into that understanding, and doesn't make someone feel bad for not having encountered it before, but also makes it imperative to understand now. So it's kind of like, okay, you're here now, you need to know this, and in a really accessible way. So that's Indigenous Rights by Chelsea Vowel. I talked earlier this year about Eskimo Pie, Poetics of Inuit Identity by Norma Dunning. And I just recently read another poetry collection, nonfiction kind of exploration of memoir poetry called On Me by Francine Cunningham, who, similarly to Norma Dunning, writes about the experience of being an Indigenous person who is raised in an urban environment and away from the land or the traditional background of your people, and what that means, and the kinds of things that you might struggle with in relating to you and your family and your culture, as well as how other people see you. She writes about being white passing, just really, really interesting poetry. So that was Francine Cunningham.
Nice. Just getting back to Seven Fallen Feathers, I also had a chance to read it before our interview with Tanya Talaga, and I was glad I did read it, just because I think we talked about that maybe on that episode. It's a book that I probably wouldn't have read before, and just, I don't know why, just maybe based on the subject matter and obviously what the book was about. I knew it was an important book, and I'm really glad I read it. And I still feel this way today, that I think it's one of those books that every Canadian should read. And it was a difficult book to get through. And I mentioned this to Tanya Talaga, and I meant that in the best possible way, is that just everything that happened with those students in that book. But it is, it's an unfortunate part of our history and still continues today, and probably the most important Canadian read I think most people could read about today. Caitlin, did you have any other nonfiction picks?
I have a couple, yeah. Just thinking about what you guys were talking about. Another nonfiction book that might be on the list is A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. And in that book, she talks about intergenerational trauma and problems with contemporary Indigenous identity, and most importantly, this sort of Indigenous renaissance that we're seeing happening. A few years ago, we had the reconciliation, calls to action. I think Indigenous culture is being more widely recognized, but maybe not necessarily in a way that is productive or positive. Anyways, this book really talks about getting away again from that historical perspective, what it's like to be Indigenous in Canada outside of what people might think an Indigenous person is. So it explains that a little bit better. And it's really informative. Again, as you said, it's a hard read sometimes. Part of the book talks about parallels between the experiences of the Holodomor, when the Soviet government deliberately starved Ukrainians to eliminate them. It makes parallels to the experiences of Indigenous people in Canada. Accurate ones, I think. So it does make you think. It's hard, but again, just like Seven Feathers, it's an important thing to read, I think, for learning. I also read From the Ashes, and I love that book. My Story of Being Métis, Homeless, and Finding My Way by Jessie Thistle. This book was really similar to like some of those other just crazy childhood books, like Jeanette Wall's The Glass Castle, and C. Sunrise wrote North of Normal. Like the childhoods that some people experience just blows my mind, and that they come out the other side such amazing people. It's a really good story about resilience and hope, even if, again, it's really hard to read sometimes. I highly recommend From the Ashes. It's a really, really good book, and it's so well written.
I was going to say with From the Ashes, I remember seeing it on, because I believe it came out in 2019, I want to say. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing it on so many like best of lists, and it was part of Canada Reads that year. And I was just, it's one of those books too, where maybe if you're not familiar with the title, like if you've been to a bookstore or library anytime between 2019 and today, you've 100% seen this book somewhere.
You should read it.
Yes. Yeah. And it's funny because it's, I joke around about, I've got all these books I want to read, and that one is on my list of stuff I definitely want and need to read. So we talked about obviously some fiction and nonfiction, but, there's also books for babies, kids, and teens that are really popular at the library. Caitlin, do you have any suggestions for some great new titles for kids?
Well, for our little ones, again, we talked about Richard Van Camp. And he has a couple of board books. We Sang You Home. The other title's slipping my mind.
Welcome Song for Baby, one, and Little You.
Little You, that's the one I'm thinking of. He also wrote a book, What's the Most Beautiful Thing You Know About Horses? That's a really beautiful picture book. So for little guys, there was Sometimes I Feel Like a Fox by Danielle Daniels. I love that book. We actually use it in story time with little masks that are the animal faces, and it talks about the different animals and how you might feel as that animal. And it's just a lovely book. It has really pretty art. Kids seem to really like pretending that they're an animal, so it's really engaging. I highly recommend that one. We just have a lot of children's books.
What about stuff for teens? Is there anything that sticks out?
When I was doing my weekly 3 for graphic novels and comic books, a lot of that stuff is great for teens. I came across this one called Arctic Comics, and it's by Michael Kusagak. It has really cool stories. They're kind of creepy and scary, but right up a teen's alley, I think. There's also Sherry Dimeline's The Marrow Thieves. I believe that was a YRCA book. I can't remember what year. That's a really great one to read. And then I talked about Moonshot, the Indigenous comics collection. That one has all kinds of different stories, different styles of art. And I think it's really engaging for teens and really cool contemporary stories.
Just jumping back to the littler kids for a moment, one of my favorite illustrators is Julie Flett, who is a Cree Métis author, visual artist, and illustrator based out of Vancouver. And she has written a number of books. I recommend them all. They're fantastic. One of them is Black Bear, Red Fox, Colors in Cree. And it's a board book that goes through different animals and their colors and has the words listed in different languages, English as well as Plains Cree. And it's just there's a little introduction at the beginning that talks about how in Cree the concept of color is approached differently than it is when we're describing it in English. And it just, as I was reading this, it just speaks to the importance of having stories in one's home language, in being able to talk and express yourself in a language that captures what it is that you're experiencing, because translation doesn't always get that. So as great as it is to have that, being able to have books that are published in multiple languages or an author's home language, I think is just fantastic. But Julie Flett, check her out for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think, one thing we've really learned here over the last few years, and shouldn't have taken this long to realize it, is that representation matters so much. And, I remember we've had a conversation kind of off the air about, even when we were talking about our March Madness stuff and how it's unfortunate that a lot of these, characters, are from like 50 plus years ago. And of course, they're always like white, English, whatever, a lot of times male. But, we are slowly starting to see, some of these, really popular characters and especially children's books too come out in other languages. And it's so important right now.
Bryce and I are both big movie fans. Are there any titles, Caitlin, that you have that have been made into movies or will be released soon?
Yeah, I just recently watched one. I feel like I keep talking about Richard Van Camp today. On Canopy, I watched
Lesser Blessed?
Yes, that one, The Lesser Blessed. I just watched that it's available on Canopy, directed by Anita Doran, based on the book of the same title about a young guy living up in the Northwest Territories. I really enjoyed it. I think I might watch it again. It's sort of a teen issues type of film and searching for one's identity. I highly recommend it. It's really great. And yeah, that's available through Canopy, so you can stream it. And I think Hoopla might actually have it too. And then there's Indian Horse, which is based on the book by Richard Wagamese. That one's been out for a little while. I think we have it available through DVD, through the collection, maybe even streaming. And that's a fantastic story. I highly recommend reading the book and watching the movie if you haven't yet. I hope lots of people have already done that because it's such a good book. Based on Saul, who went to residential school and sort of his experiences there and getting out of residential school because he happened to be really great at hockey. It's a great film. I like the book a little bit better, but that's kind of how it goes sometimes, I think, more often than not.
I was going to say, it'd be hard to come up with a list where it's like the movie's better than the book. It'd be a very short time.
That could be maybe a whole episode.
It would probably be a very short episode. Yeah.
People might debate that.
Yeah.
People might have different opinions about various movies and books, but they're always strong opinions. Mm-hmm. And I actually heard that, well, I haven't seen it yet, I'm hoping, but there was a Monkey Beach movie made. It premiered at the 2020 Vancouver International Film Fest. I could not find it, so if anybody knows where I can find that movie, I really would love to watch it.
I have seen Monkey Beach, the movie. It is directed by Loretta Todd, and I thought it was fantastic. Sorry, I feel like I'm rubbing it in, but I feel like it's a great movie. It was streaming when I saw it. We don't have it in our catalog, but I'm sure that whenever it becomes available in a format we can get, that we will, because it just is incredible performances. The scenery, the setting of the movie, it's just, I think people should watch it. And if I can find it, I'll include a link in the item list to where people might be able to watch it.
Keep your eyes open for that one. Yeah. I will be too.
Yeah. And I kind of like that this has come kind of full circle to where we started the discussion.
Yep. With Eden Robinson, the queen of fiction. Such a great writer. I just love her.
So Bryce, before we get to our roundtable questions, can you let everyone know what we'll be chatting about on our next episode, which will be available on Friday, June 18th?
So, Caroline, it's bound to happen. There's a title that you want to borrow, but it's not available at the moment, so you have to place a hold on it. But maybe there's a lot of other people also waiting for that title. So you're looking for something similar to read and watch. So on our next episode, we're going to be sharing some read-alike and watch-alike titles that you can borrow while you wait for your next hold to come in. So we come across this a lot. I've seen it online where it's like, oh, there's so many holds on this title. Well, obviously, with us being a library, we've got so many read-alike and watch-alike titles that you can borrow that are very similar to some of the, those titles that have a ton of holds on them at the moment. So, I'm looking forward to sharing some picks on the next episode, aren't you?
I absolutely am. I'm looking forward to sharing some and getting some ideas.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we mentioned on our last episode, we were talking about the Amazing Race, and we mentioned them at the start of today, that Anthony Johnson and James Makokis, who did an event with EPL back in 2019, were the winners of one of the seasons of Amazing Race Canada. Here's the question after all that build-up. If you were competing on the Amazing Race, who would you want as your partner? Caitlin?
Such a loaded question. Well, I know there's a lot of contestants on there that have their family, their mom or their dad, or, their partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. But I have a couple of coworkers that are absolutely obsessed with Amazing Race, and they know everything about it. They're also super physically fit. I'm talking about Lindsay, my friend Lindsay, Commandeer Turnbull. She's an amazing person. I love her to death. She runs marathons. I think she could really carry me through the Amazing Race, and I think that she would love to be able to be on there just to say she could be on there. She definitely got me into watching the Amazing Race. She'd come to work and be like, "Oh, you had to have seen what happened. I can't believe what this person said. I don't know, is it real? Are they just pretending to be that horrible?" Stuff like that. So I think I would be amiss to not at least offer her the opportunity to be my Amazing Race partner.
Smart.
Sounds like a good partner.
She could carry me.
Bryce, who are you taking?
It's funny because I ran this question by Cheryl, and of course,
a right of first refusal thing.
Yeah, pretty much. She definitely had that first right of refusal. But I would still pick her as my Amazing Race partner. It's funny because before I would say, she's a great, we've gone on road trips or whatever, and she's a great navigator. But the thing I've learned here over the last little while is she's a much more aggressive driver than I am. So I think we would maybe switch roles, and I would be the navigator, and I could see her just driving in through traffic, zigzagging all over the place on these crazy back highways to get us to the point where we need to be. So I naturally am going with my wife, Cheryl, on this one.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Caroline, how about you?
I'm going with The Rock. I couldn't think of anyone, and he's kind of my default partner choice. It would take someone with the athletic ability of The Rock to kind of balance me out, so that's where we would need to be. But my real answer to this question is I want to make a pitch to Amazing Race Canada, and that is I think they should make an offer to Don Iveson and Nahed Nenshi to team up as a pair now that they might have some free time. I would watch that. I think that would be
yeah.
That'd be good.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it's like the Mayors, and then they do that cheesy pose where it's back to back with their arms folded.
Yeah. I
so
think
good.
so for sure.
Yeah.
So speaking of municipal politics, as of the next election day, Edmonton will officially rename the city wards with Indigenous names. These traditional names were gifted to the city's naming committee by the Committee of Indigenous Matriarchs to honor these sacred places in Edmonton and to preserve the history for future generations. Which ward, as of election day, will you live and or work in? Caitlin?
So I actually thought that I lived and worked in the same ward, but I don't, even though I live about 5 minutes from work. I live in the very, very east end of Nakota Iska, and I work in Anungnuk, which is Inukjuat for Spirit of Life, Breath of Life, which I think is kind of cool because Woodcroft is sort of my spirit of life. I love being at work.
Yeah, so it fits.
It fits, yeah.
Good. Bryce?
So I think it's really cool that they are kind of renaming these wards, and I think we're going to see a lot here in the fall of, getting people to kind of embrace their ward name and learn how to pronounce it. I right now live and work in the same ward, obviously, from being at home, but formerly Ward 9. So that right now I'm in Pihe-Suwin. So that one's pretty easy to say. Pihe-Suwin. How about you, Caroline?
I work in the Métis ward, which is a Michif or word for the Métis people, and it was given to this area because they developed farms on river lots that became integral to the formation of the city. And I live in Odaimin, which is an Anishinaabe word meaning strawberry or heartberry, and it was chosen because of the heart of the downtown and the North Saskatchewan River. So
Nice.
yeah, I will have a link in the item list to where you can go on the city's website to learn more about what ward you'll be in, how to pronounce the ward, and the meaning behind the name. Thank you for joining us today, Caitlin. Is there anything coming up at EPL that you would like to let people know about?
Absolutely. Well, we've been talking a lot about books today, so I wanted to just mention the Rise, Reconciliation and Solidarity Edmonton Book Club meeting, which is happening June 9th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. And we're doing the title, We Remember the Coming of the White Man, Special 2021 edition, and a chance to hear from the book's editor and storyteller, Raymond Yakilia. On June 10th and 24th, Elder-in-Residence Joanne Saddleback is holding a Let's Talk events on clothing and treaty, so definitely check that out. June 19th, our partners, the Canadian Native Friendship Centre and the City of Edmonton Indigenous Relations Office, are collaborating on a virtual Edmonton Indigenous Peoples Festival. It'll be shared and promoted by EPL. You'll see that around on the website, etc. And also, if you ever want to check out what we're doing on the team or what's happening with Indigenous Services at EPL, you can always go to epl.ca/Indigenous.
Great.
Okay, lots going on for June.
Yeah.
It's a big month for us.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure that you're subscribed so that you automatically get all of our new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love getting reviews. And if you like what you hear, tell a friend about the show.
Yeah, and don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes. So if you want to share any books you've read or how you're going to be observing National Indigenous History Month, email us at podcast@epl.ca or hit us up on Twitter by using the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.